Welcome everyone to another episode of Kami Academy. Let me first and foremost apologize for the huge break I took from making these videos. Paladins is an ever-changing game, so I was nervous that the next patch might make this video obsolete. However, it seems like the base of the game is pretty much set in stone, so I'm gonna go for it. If you could all open your books to page 1, today we'll be covering A Beginner's Guide to Paladins, settings, game modes, and classes.
All topics and mechanics covered in this video are subject to change.
So let's start off. Hi, my name is Kami. I like to play Paladins and take long walks on the Serpent Beach. You kind of see how I gave you like an idea of what I'm like? That's one thing I feel Paladins is lacking in. I mean, it does have a tutorial and it starts you off with it, but it's so generic and it doesn't really dive into the important topics a new player needs to know. So I'll be covering some of those topics in this video. First, we have setting. Clicking on the options button in the bottom right will bring you to the video tab. Now, the only notable setting here is FOV, or field of view. Higher FOV will allow you to see more around you, but the enemies might seem a little smaller. Lower FOV will get less visibility, but the enemies will look a little bigger. The next tab is audio, and the main thing I want to point out is there is voice chat. Now, not a lot of people use it, but it's there. Please, 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 if you have a lot of background noise, or maybe just like a low-end mic that picks up everything going on around you, keep push to talk on. Nobody wants to hear your mother screaming at you to get off Paladins. Skipping over to controls, there's a lot of useless settings here if you're coming in for a PC, which this guide is mainly for the PC users. The only settings we're going to worry about on the PC are the bottom three: mouse smoothing, mouse sensitivity, and scope sensitivity. Now, mouse smoothing you pretty much want disabled 100% of the time. This was mainly a feature for some of them low-end mice that might skip a little bit to where it would smooth out those skips. But if you have any sort of decent mouse nowadays, you do not want it. It's actually going to give you input lag, and input lag is bad. Mouse sensitivity is how fast your cursor moves when you move your mouse. If you want some tips on finding out what kind of sensitivity you should use, check out my Kami Academy, Finding Your Sensitivity. The bottom of this list is scope sensitivity. This just refers to when you're aiming down a scope, not like an aim down sight with Victor, so it only applies to Strix and Kinessa. But as more champions get added that look down scopes, well, it'll get applied to them. I like 0. It keeps the cursor moving the exact same speed as if you aren't scoped. The thing I want to note about here in the binding section is over on the top right. You can click this, and by default it's set to all champions, but if you wanted to change some specific bindings for a champion, you can scroll through, find one you like maybe a Victor, and then instead of using Q to throw a grenade, maybe I want to use one of my mouse buttons. As easy as that. Now, the last tab, and the most important tab, is gameplay. So combat log is the right side of the area that helps you keep track of who's alive and who's dead. It's like a kill feed. Always show player health enables the HP bar to always show up over your teammates, not only when you highlight them. Really helps if you're playing a healer. And show team UI, this one is my favorite. It gives so much information. It acts like another combat log showing who's alive and who's dead, but if they are dead, it even shows their respawn timer. And it even shows your teammate's ult charge. Gives so much information. Please, please, please enable all 3 of these immediately. And on auto purchase items, I suggest you disable this as soon as possible. Once you get a general grasp of what items do, turn it off. I currently have an item guide up on YouTube from Kami Academy, but it's a little bit out of date and I plan on revamping it here in a future video real soon. Here you've got the reticle bloom, reticle change over target, all the reticles. Reticle is another word for crosshair. So if you wanted to change the way your crosshair looked, you'd adjust the reticle type. If you wanted to change the color, you change the color. If you wanted to make it so when you highlighted your teammates, it didn't change the actual color, because normally it goes blue when you're highlighting a teammate, you can disable that so it always stays the color that you want. And lastly, reticle bloom makes it so when you jump or when you're losing accuracy as you're firing a weapon, it expands, kind of like dynamic crosshair in Counter-Strike, if anyone understands that reference. I prefer to have it disabled. If you want to understand the spread of a certain champion, maybe turn it on for a little bit, get a general idea, then turn it back off. And we've got toggle zoom down here, makes it so when you're zooming in on Kinessa, Victor, Strix, whoever, instead of holding it down, you just click it once to enable it, click it again to disable it. And profanity filter, make sure you disable that so all the people can let you know how promiscuous your mother is. On to the game modes, and before we cover these 3 game modes, I'd like to inform you that until you hit account level 5, you'll be playing up against bots. No, you're not a god sent to the earth to play Paladins and be the best player in the world. You're just playing bots. Calm down. So these 3 game modes are Onslaught, Payload, and Siege. So Onslaught is a very deathmatchy type of gameplay. The respawn timers are super short, and the goal is to just pile onto one point and kill any enemy in your way. Each kill will grant your team 5 points, and controlling the central area will grab about 1 point per second. First team to 400 points wins. Easy peasy. Payload is more of an objective type mode. So your team will randomly chosen to either be attacking or defending the payload, right? So once the game starts, the attacking team will have 7 minutes to push the payload in. Once the attacking team pushes the payload to the end, or the time runs out, the team will swap sides. There's Neo. The next round, the attacking team either needs to push the payload to the end faster than Team 1, Or if the payload wasn't even pushed to the end in the first place, then they'll have to push it farther than the previous attackers. Whichever gets it farther or to the end faster wins the game. The last game mode is what the majority of the player base plays, including me, and that's Siege. This mode is like a mix of onslaught and payload. You start off fighting for a central capture point. Now the goal is to get the capture point to 100% for your team. Capture point progresses 3% every second one of your teammates are on it, as long as no other enemies are contesting it. The most important thing to note about this is that the capture point doesn't go faster if more people are standing on it. It used to be like that, and people coming from Overwatch, I'm sure you're probably thinking 3's the cap, which it used to be. Not anymore. One person is the max capture speed. This encourages the 4 other players to head off and zone out the routes enemies will take to recapture the point. Once the capture gets to 99%, either for yours or the enemies, the game will check to see if the opposing team has had anybody on the point for the last 1 second. If so, it will trigger an overtime. The overtime will last for about 6 seconds. If the other team touches the point, it will re-trigger the overtime. Each time the overtime is re-triggered, the timer will go faster and faster and faster. After about 5 times, the overtime will only last like a fraction of a second, making it almost impossible to really stall out the point that much longer. Once a team has captured the point, a payload will spawn for them and they will be rewarded 1 point. And now that team will have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to push that payload to a destination. This destination is usually right outside the enemy spawn. So the farther it gets, the harder it is to push. Once the timer gets to 1 second, if a member of the attacking team is at least near the payload, it'll trigger the overtime. And then the whole overtime system works pretty much the same way as a capture point. Now, if the attacking team successfully pushes in the payload, they'll be rewarded another point. If the defending team successfully defends the payload, they will be rewarded a point. Both teams will then reset back into their spawn and have about 45 seconds to get ready for the next round. The first team to 4 points will win the game. 2 things I'd like to note about the Siege mode is you'll retain your ultimate charge past rounds. So saving your ultimate for the next round is sometimes the right idea. And the other is that if a team is at 3 points, you cannot win that last point off of a defense. The final point must come from a point capture or a successful payload conversion. Like I said before, it's like the only one that I play, and I think it's the majority of the people play it. Plus, when you want to get into ranked, it's the only mode available for ranked. You might as well get used to it. Now, jumping into the last topic I want to talk about in this video is classes. The Paladins has 4 distinct classes that each champion falls into. We've got your frontliners, or tanks as I'll probably refer to them from now on, your supports, your damage, and your flankers. Each one having their own icon that represents their flankers, tanks, damage, supports. So frontliners are the tanks, like I said. They normally have a higher health pool along with abilities that allow them to take the brunt of the damage. So for example, Fernando is a tank. He has a shield that blocks 8,000 damage, plus he has a crap ton of health. Supports are the healers of the game. Now some supports are more focused on healing, while others are kind of off healers that bring other benefits to the team. So for example, Ceres is a healer that I would consider is a healer. Like she right-click heals, almost Mercy-like. But her damage isn't really there because her soul orbs fire very slowly. Or if you would compare it to Pip, Pip does have a heal that heals for 1200, but he also has a lot of utility coming out of his right click, slowing people down, good mobility with his weightless, and the ability to turn anyone into a chicken that only has 1500 health, one of the best ultimates in the game. So now you have your damage dealers, which primarily do your damage. Who would have thunk it? They're normally the champions that are sitting in the backline doing really good chip damage, and they don't have to be in the backline, but they can. Like Cassie, for example, does very well in the backline because she has 0 damage drop off on her bow and arrow. The last class, flankers. Now these are also damage dealers, but they're more of the kill finishers. These champions usually have high mobility, allowing them to go the flanking routes or behind the enemy team to jump on their squishy champions, normally the supports. If we take Androxus, for example, he has a dash that goes pretty far, gets 3 of them at a time for only a 10-second cooldown, and a reversal that makes him immune to damage coming up in the front, giving him a little bit of an out if he gets caught in a sticky situation. So depending on when you're actually watching this guide, certain compositions might be considered good or bad. Maybe right now it's all about that 2 tank, 1 support, 2 damage. Or maybe it's all about that 1 tank, 1 support, 2 damage, 1 flank. Wait, did that add up to 5? Whatever it is, the core around any hero shooter, like Paladins, is to have some diversity. When going into a game, I'd suggest always trying to have at least 1 tank and 1 support. And hey, the game starts you off with 1 champion of each class, so play each one for a few games, see if you like them. Even if you don't, it at least gives you an insight on how that champion's played and where they like to position themselves. It helps you better understand how you can play your champions that you enjoy alongside the rest of the champions of the realm. That should wrap up everything in the first section of the Beginner's Guide to Paladins. Make sure you're here for my next class where we'll be covering currencies, card systems, and items. Don't be late. I'll see you guys next time. Hey, thanks for watching. I'm not gonna be one of those people who asks you to like and subscribe, so I'm not gonna ask.